Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I have 4 true horror stories from deep in the woods for you. Number 1. I grew up with a very outdoorsy family. We always went camping and hiking in the summer. I grew up outside. My mother told this story to my sister and I about a time she went camping with my dad before we were born. I was in my tent, and it was the middle of the night, perhaps 1 a.m., and I had woken up to go pee, just like normal. I was about to unzip the tent when I heard a small scratching sound. I paused. It was a slow, deliberate, crunchy, digging kind of sound. It was too rhythmic for an animal. So after making sure it wasn't your father, who was sharing the tent, I unzipped a corner of the door and peeked out. The moon was just bright enough for me to see a young woman squatting right next to our little tent, digging at the ground with her bare hands. Even your father was scared, so he went and shined a flashlight on her and told her to go back to wherever she had made camp. The woman got up silently, leaving a 4-inch deep hole next to the tent, and started walking away. I went outside, went to pee, and go back into my sleeping bag. A few minutes later, I was awoken again by a clattering sound of a person or animal walking around where we had put our stuff. I looked outside again, and the woman was crouched low, walking around our stuff and looking at things the way a monkey might. Your father stepped out of the tent, shined the flashlight on her again, and she faced him. He asked her to kindly leave our stuff alone, but she stood there, dirty and neglected looking, staring at the night. He gave up and went back into her tent. Soon we heard her digging again at her little hole, which was literally 6 inches and 2 pieces of thin nylon away from my head. I shouted for her to go away, and she ran away and never returned. I fell back asleep, and in the morning our stuff was scattered, but nothing was stolen. Number 2. An instance so weird was when I was hiking and decided to set up a camp off in the woods, had a fire, ate, and set up my little tent. Fell asleep without a problem. Woke up in the middle of the night to some heavy breathing outside my tent. I listened for a bit, scared shitless, and then some movement, and the sound was gone. Woke up the next morning and there was a photo of a family stuck with a nail to a tree right behind my tent, and fresh footprints in the dirt. Being the idiot I am, I followed the path of the footprints a kilometer or so back into the woods, where it ended at a road. Across the street was an abandoned house, and while checking out the house for anything useful, I found several other photos of the people from the photo, individual headshots, and notes apologizing for not protecting them or not being there for them. I got a feeling like I wasn't alone, and decided to make an exit, and as I came out of the house there was a pickup truck in the road, watching me leave. He offered me a ride back to the highway and some food or drink, and told me all about the family that lived there and how they all died. I never visited the area again. It was near the border of Montana, Alberta, and I have since moved far, far away. Several people asked about how they died and what I remember the guy telling me. I didn't get into much detail with him. He told me that the father had an accident while driving and stuck in an oncoming vehicle with mother and 2 kids in it. He lived and everyone else died, so it was likely the father who was still around, but he didn't mention anything about what happened to him. Number 3. My friends and I went winter camping in the middle of a large park at the end of a 5-mile dirt road. Of course there weren't many people out there. On our last evening at the park, we took a short hike to an outcrop that looked over the valley. On our way back to the road, we crossed paths with a kid, mid-late 20s. We thought nothing of it, said hello, and drove into town to eat some dinner. Well, we were camping right across the road from this outcrop, so when we got back to the end of the dirt road, there were about 20 volunteer search and rescue cars all around near our campsite. One of the volunteers approached us and asked about a kid who fell from the 200-feet outcrop. Sure enough, he matched the description of the kid we crossed paths with. We were quite freaked. We got back to our campsite, drank some beer, and continued feeling uncomfortable. We continued to drink. At about 1 a.m., as we were getting ready to pass out, we hear this gut-wrenching scream, cry, awful noise. It was the kid's mother. They found his body. The screaming went on for what felt like an hour, but was probably more like 10 minutes. No sleep was had that night. During another trip out there, we saw a deer that had fallen from a different cliff. This thing was all over the place, with its head facing the trail. Number 4. I actually visited the suicide forest in Japan by myself last year. I was near Mount Fuji anyway, so figured it wasn't much of a detour. I'd been in there for about 2 hours perfectly, hadn't gotten frightened, seen a few things. Then at one point, at probably the furthest point I'd walked, I came across a sleeping bag under a tarp. One thing to know about Aokigahara Forest, it's dead silent, no insects or birds. It's also a forest ground on top of ancient lava and the dead roots of previous trees, so there's no ground level really. There are caverns and holes everywhere. It's actually very dangerous to walk in, so I'd approached the sleeping bag when suddenly noticed that it looked like something was in it, and a wave of an awful smell hit me. I panicked a little and turned around to get away from it, but my foot went straight through the rotting roots and I got stuck for about 3 minutes. Not very long, but I was completely freaked, totally convinced I was a few feet away from a dead body in this dark, silent forest, and unable to get away. Eventually, I got loose and didn't turn back, just marched the hour straight out of that place. The whole walk back I felt incredibly uneasy. I deleted most of the photos I'd taken out of the scene. Of respect, I guess. I don't believe in the supernatural, but that was as close as I'd come to. Hey there, thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. And if you like my videos and want to see more, please subscribe to my channel. And I will see you all in my next video.